What happens when a beloved talk show host presses a Hollywood star on his most controversial project, and he refuses to back down? The air in the studio grows electric, thick enough to cut with a knife. What begins as a routine promo interview spirals into one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime TV history. Before we get into it, hit subscribe and drop a comment. You're going to want to talk about this one. The Kelly Clarkson Show was meant to be a safe space for Taylor Kitsch to promote his latest film, but from the moment he sat down, something felt off. Kelly's usual warmth seemed strained, and Taylor, normally easygoing, appeared guarded, tense. "So, Taylor," Kelly began, her voice carrying an unusual edge that longtime viewers would immediately notice. "Let's talk about your new film. Quite a departure from your previous work, isn't it?" Taylor shifted in his chair, jaw tightening imperceptibly. "Yeah. Well, I think it's important for actors to challenge themselves, to take on projects that might make people uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable is certainly one way to put it," Kelly replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "When I read the synopsis, I was surprised. You chose something divisive." Taylor leaned forward, the first cracks showing in his composure. "Divisive, Kelly? With respect, I think you're mischaracterizing the film." "Am I?" Kelly pressed, steady but pointed. "From what I understand, it glorifies some pretty problematic behavior. How do you reconcile that with your platform, your influence?" Taylor's eyes narrowed. The studio fell silent, save for the soft hum of the cameras. "I think you're making assumptions based on a synopsis. Maybe some online chatter." Kelly didn't back down. Years of handling high-stakes conversations had prepared her for this. "I've done my research, Taylor. I've spoken to people involved, read leaked script excerpts. This isn't just about a synopsis. It's about accountability." Taylor's voice rose slightly, frustration bubbling. "You know what, Kelly? I expected better. I thought you'd want a real conversation about storytelling, about complexity, not a surface-level judgment based on gossip." The audience stirred uncomfortably. This wasn't the breezy celebrity chat they expected. Kelly leaned in, voice sharp. "I'm not interested in gossip, Taylor. I'm interested in accountability. You have a platform. Young people are watching. Don't you have a responsibility to consider the message you're sending?" Taylor laughed, humorless. "Accountability to who? To you? To people who haven't even seen the work?" He ran a hand through his hair, agitated. "This is exactly what's wrong with the industry. Everyone's worried about being politically correct, about not offending anyone. So now we can't tell real stories anymore." "Real stories?" Kelly raised an eyebrow. "Yes. Real complex human stories that don't fit into neat little boxes to make everyone comfortable," Taylor snapped, abandoning any pretense of calm. Kelly leaned back, studying him. "I think we have very different definitions of what makes a story worth telling, Taylor." The tension in the studio was palpable. Crew members exchanged nervous glances, knowing something had shifted. This wasn't just a promotion anymore. It was a clash, a battle over art, accountability, and influence. And nobody knew how it would end. What had started as a challenging interview was quickly spiraling into something far more combustible. "You know what your problem is, Kelly," Taylor said, his voice dropping into a low, dangerous growl. "You've been in this bubble so long, surrounded by people who tell you what you want to hear, that you've forgotten what real art looks like." The audience gasped audibly. Kelly's expression hardened. For the first time in the interview, genuine anger flared in her eyes. "My problem?" she repeated slowly, voice dangerously quiet. "My problem is that I care about the impact entertainment has on people's lives. My problem is that hiding behind the excuse of art doesn't give you a free pass to glorify harmful behavior." Taylor stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the floor. "Harmful behavior? Are you serious right now?" "Completely serious," Kelly replied, her gaze unwavering. "And deep down, you know exactly what I mean." Taylor remained standing, fists clenched at his sides, staring down at her. Kelly, seated, radiated an unsettling calm. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. "You want to know what I know?" Taylor's voice tightened with barely contained anger. "I know you sit there acting like some moral authority after making millions singing songs about heartbreak and revenge. But somehow, when I make a film exploring the darker sides of human nature, suddenly I'm the villain." Kelly rose to meet him eye to eye, measured but unflinching. There's a difference between exploring darkness and celebrating it, Taylor. Between artistic expression and giving a platform to dangerous ideas. Dangerous ideas, Taylor mocked, a sneer curling his lips. Right? Because showing morally ambiguous characters is somehow more dangerous than half the garbage Hollywood greenlights every day. This isn't about moral ambiguity, Kelly shot back, stepping closer, intensity sharpening. This is a film romanticizing manipulation and emotional abuse. Your character enables a predator, learns from him, and in doing so, he's presented as someone the audience should identify with. Taylor's face flushed red. You don't understand the nuance. My character goes through an arc. He learns, he grows, does he? Kelly countered, voice cold. Because from what I've read, his growth is becoming more adept at the very manipulation the film supposedly condemns. That's not character development, Taylor. That's a how-to guide. That's completely out of context. Taylor stammered, confidence faltering for the first time. You're reducing a complex narrative to some simplistic reading that misses the point entirely. Kelly's eyes bore into him as she stepped even closer. Her voice dropped, but the intensity never wavered. Then explain it to me. Explain how a film showing detailed psychological manipulation through characters we're meant to empathize with is somehow not promoting those behaviors. Taylor's composure finally cracked. It's showing consequences. How these behaviors destroy people, relationships, the manipulator himself. Where? Kelly demanded, voice sharp enough to cut glass. Where in this film are those consequences? Because all I see is 2 hours of your character, learning increasingly sophisticated ways to deceive and control women with any negative fallout blamed on the women for not being strong enough to resist. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Sensing that the interview had become more than just a conversation, it had turned into a full-blown confrontation. Taylor opened his mouth, then closed it, his expression shifting from anger to something closer to panic. You're twisting everything. You're making it sound like something it's not. I'm reading directly from the leaked script excerpts, Kelly said, pulling out her phone, her tone calm but lethal. Would you like me to quote them? Those were taken out of context. Stolen material that doesn't represent the final product, Taylor replied quickly, but the desperation in his voice was unmistakable. Kelly's eyes didn't waver as she began reading, her voice clear and steady. Interior, apartment, night. Marcus, your character, turns to his friend and says, the key is making her think it was her idea. If you do it right, she'll thank you for being manipulated. Then your character responds, that's brilliant. Teach me everything. The studio fell into a stunned silence. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, caught in the gravity of her words. That was one scene, Taylor said weakly, his voice cracking. One scene that's part of a larger narrative that shows how wrong that thinking is. Is it? Kelly continued scrolling. Because 3 scenes later, your character uses that exact technique on a woman, and it works perfectly. She falls for him completely, and the film presents this as his triumph, his moment of finally understanding how to succeed with women. Taylor's hands trembled now, whether from anger or something else entirely. You're cherry-picking scenes. You're ignoring the broader themes. What broader themes? Kelly's voice was relentless. The theme where the woman who falls for your character's manipulation is portrayed as weak, needy. The theme where women who resist are portrayed as cold, impossible to please. The theme where your mentor figure, your moral compass, is shown as wise and sophisticated rather than predatory and abusive. It's not. It's more complex than that, Taylor insisted, but his voice had dropped to a whisper, fragile under the weight of her words. Kelly set her phone down and fixed Taylor with a steady gaze. Taylor, I've been in this industry for over 2 decades. I've seen how media shapes behavior, how it influences young people, and what you've created isn't art. It's a recruitment tool. Her words landed like a hammer. Taylor's face flickered through anger, denial, confusion, and finally, something close to recognition. That's not, I never intended, he began, then faltered. Intent doesn't matter, Kelly said quietly. Each word deliberate. Impact does. And the impact of this film is teaching young men that manipulation is not only acceptable, but admirable. That women are puzzles to be solved rather than people to be respected. Taylor's chest rose and fell rapidly, his earlier bravado gone. You don't understand the pressure, the compromises you have to make in this industry. I understand plenty about pressure, Kelly replied evenly. But some compromises aren't worth making. Some projects aren't worth being part of, no matter what they promise your career. He scanned the studio as if seeing it for the first time. Audience members shifting uncomfortably, crew exchanging nervous glances, cameras recording every nuance. The silence stretched until he spoke again, his voice strained. You think you have all the answers, don't you, Kelly? That you can sit there and judge every choice I've made without knowing what it's like to have your career hanging by a thread? Kelly softened slightly but held her resolve. I'm not judging your desperation. I'm judging your choice to let that desperation promote something harmful. Harmful? Taylor scoffed, shaking his head. Everyone throws that word around like it's concrete. Like there's some objective measure of what's harmful and what isn't. There is, Kelly said simply. When content teaches men to manipulate and deceive, when it frames emotional abuse as romance, when human connection becomes a game, that is objectively harmful. Taylor began pacing behind his chair, agitation radiating from him. But that's not what the film is doing. You're projecting your own biases onto it. My biases? Kelly's voice sharpened. Yes, my bias against teaching men to treat women like objects. Against romanticizing psychological abuse. Absolutely. And I'm proud of it. That's not what we're doing, Taylor insisted, but his words rang hollow even to himself. The film is a cautionary tale. It shows the emptiness of that lifestyle. How it destroys everyone involved. Kelly leaned back deliberately, letting him hang on her every word. Then explain to me why your character's mentor, the man teaching these tactics, is shown as confident, successful, admired. Why he lives in luxury, drives fancy cars, and is surrounded by admiring women. Taylor stopped pacing, his back to her. Because that's the seductive lie that draws people in. The film shows how appealing these behaviors can seem on the surface. Kelly's eyes narrowed. For how long? Kelly leaned forward, eyes locked on Taylor. How much of this 2-hour film is devoted to showing the appeal versus showing the consequences? Taylor's shoulders slumped. That ratio? That's not what matters, is it? Kelly stood, her voice gaining intensity. When 90 minutes of your film shows detailed manipulation tactics working perfectly, and 10 minutes hints at consequences that are portrayed as the women's fault for being too weak, what message do you think your audience takes away? You're reducing everything to numbers, Taylor said, desperation creeping into his voice. Art doesn't work like that. Storytelling doesn't work like that. Influence does, Kelly shot back, unwavering. Impact does. Young men watching your film aren't going to sit there analyzing themes. They'll see techniques that work, characters they admire, a lifestyle that looks appealing. Taylor spun to face her, eyes wild. So what? We're not allowed to show morally complex characters anymore? Explore dark themes? Of course you can, Kelly said, her voice firm but gentler now. But there's a difference between exploring darkness and handing someone a roadmap for it. There's a difference between showing morally complex characters and teaching your audience to become morally compromised themselves. I never taught anyone anything, Taylor protested, voice rising. I'm an actor. I play characters. I don't create curricula. Kelly pulled out her phone again, scrolling deliberately. Do you want me to read the online forums? Communities have already sprung up around this film before its release. Men are discussing which tactics they want to try, rating female characters based on how successfully they were manipulated. Taylor's face went pale. I can't control how people react to art. You can control whether you participate in creating something that predictably generates those reactions, Kelly countered, her words cutting. And you had to know. Your agents knew. The producers knew exactly what kind of audience this film would attract, and how they would use it. That's not... We didn't... Taylor stammered, but his denial sounded hollow. Kelly's voice dropped to a whisper, each word carrying lethal precision. You knew. Maybe you didn't want to admit it to yourself. Maybe you told yourself it was just entertainment, just a paycheck, just a way to keep your career alive. But you knew. Taylor's breath came fast, shallow. Stop. Just stop. I can't stop, Kelly said, stepping closer, eyes never leaving his. Because this isn't about you anymore. This film is going into theaters. Millions will see it. And some of them will use what you've taught them to hurt real women in real ways. I didn't teach them anything, Taylor shouted, voice cracking. I'm not responsible for what other people do. Yes, you are, Kelly said without hesitation. When you participate in creating content designed to influence behavior, Kelly said, her voice low but unyielding, you are absolutely responsible for that influence. Taylor stared at her, shocked, chest heaving. The studio felt frozen. Even the audience seemed afraid to blink. You want to know what's truly tragic about this? Kelly continued, her tone now tinged with sadness. You're a talented actor, Taylor. Charismatic, skilled. You could have been part of projects that made a real positive difference. Instead, you chose this. Taylor's hands trembled. I chose survival. I chose paying rent, keeping my career alive in an industry that chews people up and spits them out. And in doing so, Kelly said quietly, her gaze steady, you chose to become part of the machine that chews up and spits out vulnerable women. Was it worth it? Her question hung in the air like a knife. For a heartbeat, Taylor seemed on the verge of answering honestly, regret flickering across his face. But then his expression hardened. You know what, Kelly? I'm done with this interrogation disguised as an interview. Kelly didn't flinch. An interrogation? You call holding someone accountable for their choices an interrogation? That's exactly what I call it, Taylor snapped, his voice sharp enough to make several audience members flinch. You invited me here under false pretenses. Told my publicist this would be a standard promotional interview. And instead, you ambushed me with some self-righteous crusade. I told your publicist I had questions about your new project, Kelly said evenly. I never promised those questions would be comfortable. Questions? Taylor laughed bitterly. Those weren't questions, Kelly. Those were accusations. Character assassinations disguised as journalism. Were they wrong? Kelly asked quietly, her voice carrying the weight of truth. Because you still haven't actually denied anything I've said about this film. You've attacked my motives instead.